There are moments, rare, unexplainable moments, when something inside you pauses. Not because you chose to stop, but because something greater reached into your timeline and interrupted you. If right now is one of those moments, you didn't just click on this message. You didn't just happen to be here. No, something pulled you. Something nudged you. Maybe it was subtle, a quiet urge. Maybe it was sudden, like a thought that wouldn't let you scroll past. Or maybe, if you're honest, there's been a strange tension building in your spirit all day, like you've been waiting for something without even knowing what it was. This is that moment. Because there has been a shift. Not in the physical world, not yet, but in the unseen. And you were chosen to feel it before you could see it. For days, maybe even weeks, things haven't felt right, have they? Conversations fell off. People you trusted suddenly seemed distant or different. Opportunities that once flowed easily began to stall. Delays appeared where progress should have been. And deep down, you kept asking yourself, why does it feel like something is working against me? You tried to rationalize it. You told yourself it was stress, bad timing, just life being unpredictable. But that explanation never fully settled in your spirit, because your spirit knew something your mind couldn't explain yet. There was resistance. Not random resistance, targeted resistance. Because whenever destiny begins to activate, opposition begins to rise. And here is the truth most people will never tell you. The closer you get to stepping into what was truly meant for you, the more intense the interference becomes. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're finally doing something right. A heaviness you felt, that wasn't weakness. A confusion, that wasn't failure. A sudden distance from certain people, that wasn't coincidence. It was a sign that something in your life was shifting, and not everything around you was meant to shift with you. And this is where the interruption becomes divine. Because just when the pressure began to build, just when the doubt started whispering louder than your faith, just when it felt like you were being slowed down, overlooked, or even quietly blocked, heaven stepped in. Not gently, not subtly, but intentionally. This message is not here to comfort your fear, it's here to confront it. To break the illusion that you've been stuck when in reality, you've been protected. To reveal that what felt like blockage was actually divine timing, holding back what wasn't ready, while preparing what is. And now something has changed. Because the resistance you've been feeling has reached its limit. The unseen battles surrounding your name, your future, your purpose has entered a new phase. And you were not meant to walk into it unaware. That's why this message found you now, not later, not yesterday, but right now. There is a reason your attention has been captured in this exact moment. There is a reason your spirit feels alert, almost like something inside you is waking up. And there is a reason this message is not letting you go easily. Because what comes next will not just explain what you've been feeling. It will expose what's been happening. And more importantly, it will reveal why your enemies, seen and unseen, can no longer block what has already been written for you. You are not here to be confused anymore. You are here to understand. You are here to awaken. And you are here because something that once had power over your path has just lost it. This is your confirmation. This is your interruption. This is the beginning of everything changing. Type "I am ready" in the comments if you feel this shift. Blessing code 1717 is now activating around your life. There is something you must understand now, something that will change the way you look at everything you've been experiencing. What you thought was random, what you tried to explain away as bad luck, unfortunate timing, or even your own doubt, was never random at all. It was a battle, a hidden, strategic, intentional battle that was unfolding behind the scenes of your life while you were simply trying to move forward. Because while you were making plans, while you were trying to grow, to heal, to step into something greater, there were forces working quietly, persistently, and deliberately to slow that movement down. Not destroy you, because they couldn't. Not erase your destiny, because that was never in their power. But delay you, distract you, drain you just enough to make you question whether you were truly moving in the right direction. And that's why it felt so confusing. Because it didn't look like a good act. It didn't come in obvious forms. It came disguised as small disruptions, delays that made no sense, opportunities that almost worked out but didn't, conversations that left you feeling unsettled for reasons you couldn't fully explain, people shifting in energy without warning, doors opening halfway only to close again just as you stepped closer. It was subtle, calculated, precise. And the reason it had to be subtle is because your spirit would have rejected it immediately if it were obvious. So instead, it was layered into your everyday life in ways that made you question yourself instead of questioning what was happening around you. You started wondering if you were overthinking, if you were being too sensitive, if maybe you were the one standing in your own way. But deep down there was always that quiet voice inside you saying, "No, something isn't right." That voice was not fear. That voice was awareness. Because behind everything you were experiencing there was resistance rising specifically against your progress. Not because you were weak, but because you were becoming stronger. Not because you were lost, but because you were getting closer to clarity. And here is what most people never realize. The moment your life begins to align with your true path, opposition does not disappear, it intensifies. Not to stop you completely, but to test your focus, your patience, and your belief in what you cannot yet fully see. That's why the battle you've been in didn't feel like chaos. It felt like pressure, a steady, persistent pressure. Pressure in your thoughts making you second-guess decisions you once felt confident about. Pressure in your emotions making you feel drained even when nothing obvious had been wrong. Pressure in your environment where things just felt slightly off, slightly misaligned, slightly heavier than they should have been. This was not accidental. This was targeted interference. And it wasn't coming from one direction. It was layered. Through situations, through timing, through people who may not have even realized they were being used as part of that resistance. Because not everyone who played a role in slowing you down did it intentionally, but the effect was the same. Distraction, delay, doubt. But here is the truth that changes everything. Even in the middle of that hidden battle, you were never unprotected. Every delay you experienced that didn't make sense blocked something you couldn't yet see. Every moment where things didn't come together the way you expected redirected you away from something that wasn't aligned with where you're now being positioned. Every uncomfortable shift in relationships revealed what could not continue into your next season. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was meaningless. And most importantly, nothing had the power to take what was truly yours. Because while that hidden battle was unfolding, something else was happening at the same time. Something greater. Something final. The resistance that once had permission to test you has now reached its limit. The strategies that once created confusion are beginning to collapse. The same pressure that once made you question yourself is about to turn into clarity so sharp that you will finally understand why everything had to happen the way it did. This is the turning point. The moment where what was hidden begins to surface. The moment where what was working against you loses its access. And the moment where you stop seeing yourself as someone who has been blocked and start recognizing that you were being prepared. Prepared for a level where interference can no longer reach you the way it once did. prepared for clarity that cannot be manipulated, prepared for movement that cannot be delayed, because what was happening behind the scenes was never meant to defeat you. It was meant to reveal what could not go with you and strengthen what could. And now that phase is ending. The hidden battle is being exposed, and what once operated in silence is about to lose its power completely. Type ISE clearly now in the comments if you feel this truth. Blessing Code 2020 is now aligning your path. There comes a moment in every destined life when growth stops being silent. When the shift inside you becomes too strong to stay hidden. When the change in your thinking, your energy, your direction begins to show, whether you speak about it or not. And that is the moment opposition begins to rise. You didn't notice it at first, did you? At the beginning, it felt like progress. You were becoming clear, stronger, more aware of what you wanted and what you no longer wanted. You started pulling back from certain conversations. You stopped explaining yourself the way you used to. You began choosing peace over proving your point. And without realizing it, you were stepping into a version of yourself that not everyone around you was prepared for. Because growth, even when it is quiet, is visible. And the moment your growth became visible, something shifted in the people around you. Some became distant. Some became unpredictable. Some became subtly resistant in ways that didn't make sense. And others began to watch you differently. Not with support, but with curiosity mixed with discomfort. Because your evolution forced a reflection they weren't ready to face within themselves. And this is where the opposition began to take shape. Not always loud, not always obvious, but present. It showed up in conversations that felt slightly off. Words that sounded normal on the surface but carried a tone you couldn't ignore. Reactions that didn't match the situation. Energy that shifted the moment you walked into a room. You felt it even when no one said anything directly. That feeling was real. Because not everyone celebrates your growth when it reveals their stagnation. Not everyone supports your clarity when it exposes their confusion. And not everyone can stay aligned with you when you begin to outgrow the version of yourself they were comfortable with. So what do? They resist. Sometimes consciously, sometimes subconsciously. Sometimes through distance, sometimes through subtle control. Sometimes through silence, sometimes through words designed to blend out. And here's the truth that changes everything. Their resistance was never about you personally, it was about what you represent. You represent movement. You represent change. You represent the breaking of patterns that others have accepted for years. And when you carry that kind of shift, you naturally disrupt environments that depend on things staying the same. That is why the opposition intensified. Not because you did something wrong, but because you started doing something right consistently. You stopped settling. You stopped shrieking. You stopped ignoring what your intuition had been trying to show you all along. And the moment you did that, the balance around you changed. The same people who once felt comfortable around you began to feel uncertain. The same dynamics that once worked began to feel strained. The same spaces that once felt familiar began to feel heavy. And instead of adjusting to your growth, some chose to push against it. That push didn't always look aggressive. It looked like doubt being planted in subtle ways. It looked like support that felt conditional. It looked like conversations that left you second-guessing your decisions. It looked like energy that drained you instead of strengthening you. And for a moment you questioned yourself. You wondered if you were changing too much. If you were becoming too distant. If maybe you were the one creating the disconnect. But what you were actually experiencing was a natural reaction to stepping into alignment. Because alignment will always expose misalignment. And once something is exposed, it cannot go back to what it used to be. This is why the pressure increased. This is why the opposition became more noticeable. This is why certain people seemed to shift all at once. It wasn't random. It was a response. A response to the fact that you were no longer operating at the level they were used to. A response to the fact that your direction was no longer influenced by what kept you small. A response to the fact that you were moving toward something they could not control. But here is what they did not realize: their resistance revealed more than it blocked. Their actions exposed what you needed to see. Their energy confirmed what your intuition had already been trying to tell you. And most importantly, their opposition had a limit. Because while they were reacting to your growth, something else was already being set in motion. Something beyond their reach. Something beyond their influence. Something that was not affected by opinion, perception, or resistance. Because what is aligned for you does not require permission from those who cannot understand it. And now that truth is about to become undeniable. Because the same opposition that tried to slow you down has just revealed why it can no longer stand in your way. You are not being pushed back. You are being pushed forward beyond the reach of what once tried to hold you in place. Type "I will not shrink" in the comments if you feel this shift. Blessing code 3030 is now activating your inner strength. As this truth settles into your spirit, understand this: every message like this is a seed planted into someone's darkness, waiting to become light. When you choose to support this mission through Super Thanks or the PayPal link in the description, you are not just giving. You are sowing into souls that are still searching for clarity, just like you once were. The word declares, "Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days," and this is that moment where your obedience becomes someone else's breakthrough. I feel led to say this directly. I am stepping into alignment by releasing what I can, because I know it will multiply beyond what I see. This is not about donation. It is about participation in a divine assignment that is reaching hearts across the world. What you release today becomes a river of truth flowing into lives you may never meet, but heaven will record it. Do not delay this prompting, because obedience carries timing, and timing carries power. Release your seed now, and watch how heaven responds to your faith. There are moments in life when everything shifts, not because of something you did physically, but because something greater stepped in spiritually. This is that moment. This is where the atmosphere changes. This is where what had been hidden begins to lose its authority. Because now the presence that does not negotiate with darkness has entered your situation. Archangel Michael does not arrive quietly when injustice has reached its limit. He does not step in when things are still undecided. He appears when a line hath been drawn and that line has now been crossed. You may not see him with your physical eyes, but your spirit recognizes the shift. That sudden sense of clarity you are beginning to feel, that calm strength replacing confusion, that awareness rising within you without effort, that is not coincidence. That is presence. That is intervention. That is divine authority moving into position around your life. Because what you have been facing was never ignored. Every delay, every moment of resistance, every hidden intention at work against you, it was all seen. It was all recorded. And now, it has reached the point where it can no longer continue unchecked. This is where Archangel Michael speaks. Not softly, not vaguely, but with precision and authority. And the message is clear. What was allowed to test you will not be allowed to stop you. You were not under attack without protection. You were not being delayed without purpose. You were not being surrounded without awareness from above. Everything that has happened had been monitored, measured, and now addressed. Because Michael does not fight emotional battles. He enforces divine order. And right now, divine order is being restored around your destiny. You may have felt alone during certain moments. You may have questioned why things were unfolding the way they were. You may have wondered why clarity took so long to arrive. But what you did not see was the timing being perfected beyond your understanding. Because intervention does not come early and it does not come late. It comes at the exact moment when it becomes irreversible. And you have reached that moment now. This is why things are beginning to feel different. Not necessarily easier yet, but clearer. Not completely resolved yet, but shifting. Because when divine justice begins to move, it does not create noise first, it creates alignment. And alignment always begins internally before it becomes visible externally. You are starting to see what you once overlooked. You are starting to understand what once confused you. You are starting to recognize who is aligned and who is not. That is not something you are forcing. That is something being revealed. Because Michael's role is not only to defend but to expose. To bring clarity where there was distortion. To remove influence where there was manipulation. To separate truth from illusion in a way that cannot be ignored anymore. And this is why the energy around you is changing. Because what once operated quietly in the background is being brought into the light of awareness. And once something is fully seen, it cannot continue in the same way. This is the turning point where protection becomes visible through results. Where confusion is replaced with understanding. Where what once felt like pressure begins to feel like direction. You are no longer reacting blindly. You are beginning to move with awareness. And that awareness is your protection. Because now you are not only being guided, you are being guarded. And this is what your opposition cannot withstand. They may not even understand what is happening. They may not be able to explain why their influence is no longer effective. They may not recognize why their attempts no longer reach you the same way. But the reason is simple. What once had access has now been restricted. What once had influence has now been removed. What once operated in subtleties now being confronted by something greater. Because when Archangel Michael stands in position, interference loses its authority. And that is exactly what is happening now. This is not a temporary shift. This is a permanent change in how your path is being protected. This is where your destiny moves from being tested to being defended. This is where your clarity becomes stronger than any confusion that once surrounded you. And this is where you begin to walk differently. Not with fear, not with hesitation, but with certainty. Because something has stepped in on your behalf and it does not step back. You are not the same person who was navigating this situation before. You are now someone who sees, someone who understands, someone who recognizes what is aligned and what is not without needing confirmation. And that is power. That is protection. That is divine authority being activated in your life. This is the moment where everything begins to change direction. Not slowly, not uncertainly, but with precision. Because what has now stepped in does not allow your path to be blocked any longer. Type "I walk with authority" in the comments if you feel this shift. Blessing code 4040 is now sealing your protection. There is always a moment, a precise, undeniable moment when pressure reaches its limit. Not your limit, but theirs. Not your breaking point, but the breaking point of everything that was working against you. And whether you realized it or not, you have already crossed into that moment. For a long time, it felt like the resistance around you had strength. Like it could delay things indefinitely. Like it and the ability to keep interfering, keep confusing, keep shifting outcomes just enough to keep you uncertain. But what you could not see was that every attempt, every delay, every subtle interference was being counted, measured, watched, until it reached a threshold it was never allowed to pass. That threshold has now been reached. Because there is something about divine timing that most people misunderstand. It does not react emotionally. It does not respond impulsively. It allows until it decides. And once it decides, everything changes at once. This is where you are now. The enemy's grip was never permanent. It was conditional, temporary, limited by boundaries that you could not see while you were inside the experience. And the reason it felt so real, so persistent, is because you were meant to grow through it, not remain in it. But now, the purpose of that resistance has been fulfilled. There is nothing left for it to do. No more lessons for it to teach. No more access for it to maintain. And once something has outlived its purpose, it is removed. This is why things are beginning to shift in ways that feel sudden. Not because the struggle was sudden, but because the end of it is. You may have noticed it already in small ways. Situations that once felt heavy no longer carry the same weight. People who once had influence over your emotions no longer affect you the same way. Confusion that once lingered now clears faster than before. This is not coincidence. This is release. Because what once had a hold on your focus, your energy, your direction is losing its grip. And it is not losing it gradually. It is losing it completely. That is the difference. Because when something is removed at a surface level, it can return. But when something is removed at a root level, it cannot reattach. And what is happening now is root level removal. The kind that disconnects influence entirely. The kind that closes access permanently. The kind that makes it impossible for the same interference to operate the way it once did. This is why you are beginning to feel stronger without trying, clear without forcing it, more grounded without needing external confirmation. Because the weight that once required effort to carry is no longer being placed on you. It hath been lifted. And with that lift comes a realization. You were never as blocked as it felt. You were never as delayed as it seemed. You were never as controlled as the situation tried to make you believe. You were in a phase, and that phase has now ended. The enemy's greatest strategy was not stopping you. It was making you feel like you were being stopped. Because if you believed that long enough, you might have slowed yourself down. You might have questioned your own direction. You might have held back when you were actually meant to keep moving forward. But even that did not work. Because despite everything, you kept going. Maybe slower at times. Maybe more uncertain at times. But you did not stop. And that persistence is what brought you to this exact moment. A moment where what was resisting you can no longer continue. This is the breaking point. Not yours, but theirs. The point where their influence collapses under the weight of what has already been decided for your life. The point where their strategies no longer find access. The point where their presence no longer creates impact. And once that point is reached, everything begins to move differently. Not because you suddenly change, but because what was working against you no longer has permission to operate. You are now moving in a space where resistance cannot attach the same way, where delays cannot form the same way, where confusion cannot cloud your direction the same way. Because the grip has been broken, and once something loses its grip, it cannot regain control. This is why you must understand what is happening right now. You are not stepping into something new from a place of struggle. You are stepping forward from a place of release. A place where the pressure has already been removed. A place where the interference has already been disconnected. A place where your path is no longer being negotiated by opposing forces. It is being cleared. And that clearing is not temporary. It is final. This is the moment where everything that once felt like resistance becomes irrelevant. Where everything that once felt like delay becomes explanation. Where everything that once felt like blockage becomes confirmation that something greater was always in motion. You are not waiting anymore. You are moving, and nothing that once tried to hold you back has the ability to do so again. Type IT is broken in the comments if you feel this shift. Blessing code 5050 is now releasing unstoppable movement into your life. There is a moment in every spiritual battle when what was hidden can no longer remain concealed. Not because someone decided to reveal it, but because truth itself begins to rise to the surface. And when truth rises, everything that depended on darkness begins to lose its structure. You are standing in that moment now. For a long time, things around you did not fully make sense. You felt certain things, but you could not prove them. You noticed shifts, but you could not explain them. You sensed intention, but you questioned whether you were reading too deeply into what you were experiencing. And because of that uncertainty, you gave the benefit of the doubt. You stayed patient. You stayed open. You allowed situations to play out without forcing conclusions. But now that phase is ending. Because what was once subtle is becoming clear. What was once hidden is becoming visible. What was once confusing is becoming undeniable. This is exposure. Not exposure that comes with chaos, but exposure that comes with clarity. The kind that does not need confrontation to prove itself. The kind that reveals truth through patterns, through consistency, through the quiet realization that what you are now seeing has always been there. You are beginning to notice the details you once overlooked. The tone behind certain words. The intention behind certain actions. The difference between what was said and what was actually meant. And as you begin to see these things clearly, something inside you is shifting. You are no longer questioning yourself the way you once did. You are no longer explaining away what your intuition is showing you. You are no longer trying to maintain comfort in situations that no longer feel aligned. Because now you see, and once you truly see, you cannot go back to not knowing. This is why exposure is so powerful. It does not force action immediately, but it changes your awareness permanently. And awareness changes everything. Because what once had influence over you depended on you not seeing it fully. It depended on solely. It depended on confusion. It depended on you doubting your own perception. But now that clarity has entered, that influence cannot operate the same way. This is why certain dynamics around you are beginning to feel different. Not because others have suddenly changed, but because your perception has. You are seeing beyond the surface. You are recognizing what is genuine and what is not. You are understanding where energy is aligned and where it is not. And with that understanding comes separation. Not forced separation, but natural separation. Because once truth is revealed, alignment adjusts on its own. You no longer feel the need to hold on to what does not feel right. You no longer feel obligated to maintain connections that drain your clarity. You no longer feel responsible for keeping peace in environments that disrupt your growth. Because now you understand something deeper. Not everything that was around you was meant to go with you. And the exposure you are experiencing right now is showing you exactly what that is. Some of it may feel uncomfortable. Some of it may feel unexpected. Some of it may even feel disappointing. But none of it is unnecessary. Because this is not happening to create distance without reason. This is happening to create alignment without confusion. Everything that is being revealed so that you can move forward without interference, without hidden resistance, without unseen influence affecting your direction. Because what is ahead of you requires clarity. It requires awareness. It requires you to see things exactly as they are, not as they appear on the surface. And now you have that ability. This is why you must trust what you are beginning to recognize. Not react impulsively, not confront unnecessarily, but simply acknowledge, observe, and adjust accordingly. Because exposure is not about reacting. It is about understanding. It is about allowing truth to guide your next steps without forcing outcomes. And as you continue to move with that awareness, something else begins to happen. What once felt complicated becomes simple. What once felt uncertain becomes obvious. What once felt hidden becomes irrelevant. Because once truth is revealed, it no longer needs to fight for attention. It stands on its own. And now truth is standing clearly in your life. This is the moment where everything that operated behind the scenes loses its ability to remain there, where everything that depended on your uncertainty loses its access, where everything that was hidden becomes part of your understanding instead of part of your confusion. And once that happens, there is nothing left to question. You are no longer navigating blindly. You are moving with clarity. And clarity is something no opposition can manipulate. This is why what is being revealed now is not temporary. It is permanent awareness. The kind that stays with you. The kind that protects you. The kind that ensures you never walk into the same situation with the same level of uncertainty again. Because now you know. And that knowing changes everything. Type truth is revealed in the comments if you feel this clarity. Blessing code 6060 is now activating divine insight in your life. There is a truth that many people resist, not because it is difficult to understand, but because it is difficult to accept. And that truth is this: not everything that started with you is meant to continue with you. Not every person, not every environment, not every pattern, not every connection. Some things were only assigned to a season, and now that season has reached its end. What you are experiencing right now is that ending. It may not feel like a dramatic break. It may not come with loud arguments or clear conclusions. In fact, it may feel quiet, subtle, almost confusing at times. Because the separation that is happening in your life right now is not being forced. It is being orchestrated. And when something is divinely orchestrated, it does not need chaos to complete its work. You may have already noticed it. The distance that is forming without explanation. The conversations that no longer flow the way they used to. The connections that feel strained, even when nothing specific has been said. The environments that once felt comfortable, now feeling heaviness, aligned out of place. This is not random. This is separation. Not as punishment, not as loss, but as alignment. Because now that you can see clearly, now that exposure has revealed what was hidden, now that your awareness has shifted, you cannot continue to exist in the same dynamics without feeling the difference. And that difference is your signal. Your signal that something has already changed and you are being asked to move with that change instead of resisting it. This is where many people hesitate. They try to hold on to what feels familiar. They tried to maintain what once worked. They try to fix what is no longer meant to continue. But what they don't realize is this: when something is being removed through alignment, holding on to it only creates internal conflict. Because your spirit has already accepted what your mind is still trying to negotiate. You feel it. That quiet knowing that certain connections are no longer what they used to be. That certain spaces no longer support who you are becoming. That certain patterns no longer fit the direction you are moving in. And even if you cannot fully explain it, you cannot ignore it either. That is because this separation is not based on emotion. It is based on truth. The truth of who you are now. The truth of where you are going. And the truth of what can no longer go with you. Some of what is being removed may not even be negative in an obvious way. It may simply be misaligned. And misalignment, no matter how familiar it feels, cannot exist in a life that is moving into clarity. This is why the separation feels necessary even when it feels uncomfortable. Because you are not being asked to reject anything aggressively. You are being guided to release naturally. to stop forcing what no longer fits, to stop maintaining what no longer flows, to stop carrying what no longer belongs in your next phase. And as you begin to allow that release, something begins to open. Space that was previously occupied by confusion, tension, or subtle resistance. Space that now becomes available for clarity, for peace, for alignment to fully establish itself. This is the purpose of separation. Not to take something away from you, but to make room for what actually belongs to you. Because what is aligned with your destiny does not create confusion. It does not drain your clarity. It does not make you question yourself constantly. It supports your direction. It strengthens your awareness. It moves with you instead of against you. And now you are being positioned to exist only within that kind of alignment. This is why you must not interpret this phase as loss. Even if it feels like something is ending. Even if it feels like certain connections are fading. Even if it feels like certain parts of your life are no longer what they once were. Because what is being removed is not being taken from you. It is being cleared away from you. Cleared so that you can move forward without obstruction. Cleared so that you can step fully into what is next without carrying what belongs to what is over. Cleared so that your path becomes direct instead of divided. This is the moment where your life begins to simplify. Not because everything disappeared, but because everything unnecessary is being removed. And once that removal is complete, what remains will feel different. Lighter. Clearer. More stable. More aligned. Because it will no longer be mixed with what does not belong. This is not something you need to force. This is something you need to allow. Allow the distance. Allow the shifts. Allow the changes to take their natural course without trying to control the outcome. Because what is meant to remain will remain without effort. And what is meant to leave will leave without needing to be pushed. Your role is not to hold everything together. Your role is to stay aligned with what is true. And right now, truth is creating separation for your protection. This is not the end of something important. This is the beginning of something aligned. And once this separation completes, you will understand why it had to happen exactly this way. Type "I release what no longer serves me" in the comments if you accept this shift. Blessing code 7070 is now aligning your path forward. There comes a moment after separation, after exposure, after the breaking point, when something begins to return. Not randomly, not partially, but intentionally. Because once everything that was misaligned hath been removed, once everything that was interfering has lost its grip, space is created for restoration to begin. And that is where you are now. This is not just about moving forward. This is about reclaiming what should have never been delayed in the first place. Because as much as the previous phase was about resistance and removal, this phase is about restoration and return. You may not see it fully yet, but you are beginning to feel it. A shift in your energy. A quiet confidence rising where doubt once lived. A sense of calm replacing the constant need to figure everything out. That is the beginning. Because restoration does not always arrive loudly. It begins subtly internally before it becomes visible externally. And what is being restored to you is not just one thing. It is everything that was disrupted along the way. The clarity that was clouded. The opportunities that were delayed. The peace that was interrupted. A direction that felt uncertain. None of it was permanently taken from you. It was paused. And now it is being released again. This is why things will begin to align in ways that feel almost unexpected. Situations that once felt complicated becoming simple. Paths that once felt blocked opening without resistance. Conversations that once created confusion now bringing understanding. This is not coincidence. This is restoration in motion. Because once interference is removed, what was always meant for you can finally reach you without obstruction. You are no longer navigating through resistance. You are moving within alignment. And alignment has a natural flow to it. It does not force outcomes. It allows them. That is why this phase will feel different from anything you have experienced before. There will be less struggle, less questioning, less resistance, and more clarity, more direction, more stability. Because what is being returned to you is not just what was lost, but the ability to receive it without interference. And this is where you must shift your mindset. Because restoration requires acceptance. It requires you to stop expecting delay, to stop preparing for resistance, to stop anticipating that things will go wrong the way they used to. Because that phase is over. And if you continue to think from that place, you may hesitate when things begin to move forward. You may question opportunities that are actually aligned. You may slow down movement that is actually meant to accelerate. This is why awareness is important now. You must recognize that what is coming into your life now is not the same as what you experienced before. It carries a different energy, a different stability, a different level of alignment, because it is no longer mixed with interference. This is the difference between receiving something during resistance and receiving something after it has been removed. One feels uncertain. The other feels clear. And now you are entering the phase of clarity. This is where what belongs to you begins to find you without complication. Where what is aligned with you begins to connect with you naturally. Where what was once delayed begins to arrive without force. Because there is nothing left blocking it. This is also where you begin to recognize something deeper. Nothing that was truly meant for you was ever lost. It was simply waiting for the right moment to reach you without disruption. And that moment is now. This is why you must stay open. Not guarded by past experiences. Not hesitant because of what you went through. But aware, grounded, and ready to receive what is already moving toward you. Because restoration is not something you chase. It is something that reaches you once everything else has been cleared. And everything that needed to be cleared has already been removed. Now what remains is the return. The return of clarity. The return of direction. The return of momentum. The return of everything that aligns with who you are becoming. This is not temporary. This is a shift into a new phase of your life where what belongs to you arrives without resistance. And once that begins, it continues. Because there is nothing left to stop it. Type "I receive what is mine" in the comments if you accept this restoration. Blessing code 8080 is now activating abundance and alignment in your life. As restoration begins to unfold in your life, understand this sacred truth. Every seed you release becomes a light for someone still walking in darkness. When you give through Super Thanks or the PayPal link in the description, you are not supporting a platform. You are advancing a divine mission that reaches souls in their most desperate moments. The word declares, "Those who sow in tears shall reap in joy," and right now, your act of giving becomes someone else's breakthrough. I feel this deeply. I am stepping forward in obedience, releasing what I can, because I know heaven multiplies every faithful act. This is not charity. It is a prophetic alignment with what God is doing through this message. What you release today becomes a river of truth flowing into lives that are still searching for answers. Do not hesitate in this moment, because obedience carries timing, and timing carries power. So now, and watch how heaven responds to your faith with overflow. There is a moment after restoration begins when everything that once felt delayed suddenly starts to move. Not slowly, not cautiously, but rapidly. And if you are not aware of what is happening, It can feel almost overwhelming because the pace of your life begins to change in a way you did not expect. This is that moment. Because once resistance has been removed, once separation has cleared your path, once restoration has begun to return what was always meant for you, there is nothing left to slow the movement of your destiny. And when there is no resistance, movement becomes acceleration. You are stepping into that acceleration now. You may have already noticed the shift beginning. Things that once took time to understand are now becoming clear almost instantly. Decisions that once felt complicated are now being made with confidence and ease. Situations that once required effort are now resolving themselves without struggle. This is not coincidence. This is momentum. Because momentum is what happens when alignment replaces resistance. And right now alignment is fully active in your life. This is why things will begin to happen faster than you are used to. Opportunities may appear suddenly. Connections may form unexpectedly. Paths may open without warning. And what is important to understand is this. This speed is not chaos, it is precision. Because everything that is moving toward you now has already been prepared. It is not being created in this moment. It is being released in this moment. And that is why it feels immediate. Because what once had to wait no longer needs to. This is where you must shift your awareness again. Because when life begins to accelerate, hesitation can become the only remaining obstacle. If you question every opportunity, you may delay what is meant to move quickly. If you overanalyze every step, you may slow down what is meant to flow naturally. If you hold on to the mindset of delay, you may miss the rhythm of alignment. This is why trust becomes essential now. Not blind trust, but grounded trust. Trust in your clarity. Trust in your awareness. Trust in the fact that what is reaching you now is not random but aligned. Because this phase is not about waiting anymore. It is about moving. Moving with confidence. Moving with certainty. Moving with the understanding that what is unfolding now is not the same as what you experienced before. Before, you were navigating through resistance. And now, you are moving within alignment. And alignment does not slow down. It flows. This is why you will begin to notice something else. The effort you once had to put into things will decrease. Not because you are doing less, but because you are no longer working against hidden resistance. You are working with clarity. And clarity simplifies everything. It removes unnecessary steps. It removes confusion. It removes hesitation. And once those things are removed, movement becomes direct. This is acceleration. Direct movement toward what is already yours. You are no longer circling around possibilities. You are stepping into outcomes. You are no longer trying to figure out what is right. You are recognizing it immediately. And this recognition allows you to move without delay. This is also where your confidence begins to solidify. Not forced confidence. Not something you are trying to convince yourself of. But natural confidence that comes from seeing things clearly and acting accordingly. Because when you know, you move differently. And now you know. This is why your destiny is no longer something in the distance. It is something in motion. Something active. Something unfolding in real time. And the pace of that unfolding is increasing. You are not behind. You are not catching up. You are stepping into a flow that was always meant for you but could not begin until everything else was cleared. And now that it has been cleared, nothing is holding it back. This is where you must stay present. Not distracted by what used to be. Not hesitant because of past delays. But focused on what is happening now. Because what is happening now is movement without resistance. And that movement is taking you exactly where you are meant to be. Faster than you expected. Clearer than you imagined. and more aligned than anything you have experienced before. This is the acceleration phase, and once it begins, it continues, because there is nothing left to stop it. Type "I move forward now" in the comments if you accept this acceleration. Blessing code 9090 is now activating unstoppable progress in your life. There is something you must hear clearly now, because as powerful as the shift has been, as undeniable as the movement forward is becoming, there is still one thing that can slow it down, not stop it completely, but interfere with the flow you have just stepped into. And that one thing's going back. Not physically going back in every case, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually reconnecting to what has already been removed from your path. Because once separation has taken place, once exposure has revealed the truth, once restoration has begun and acceleration is active, there is a natural pull that can sometimes appear. A pull toward familiarity. A pull toward what you used to know. A pull toward people, patterns, and environments that once felt normal, even if they were never truly aligned. This is the warning. Not because you are in danger, but because you are in transition. And during transition, familiarity can feel safer than alignment, simply because it is known. You may find yourself thinking about certain situations again, replaying conversations, reconsidering connections that have already shown you their truth, questioning whether you were too quick to detach, too firm in your decisions, too aware of what was revealed. This is not clarity. This is the echo of what you have already outgrown. Because when something is removed through alignment, it does not need to be revisited for confirmation. The truth has already been shown. The shift has already taken place. The separation has already been initiated for reason. And going back, even mentally, creates a temporary opening for confusion to return. This is why you must stay grounded in what you now know. Not what you used to feel. Not what you hoped something could be. But what has already been revealed clearly. Because the enemy no longer has direct access the way it once did. But if there is any way interference attempts to re-enter, it comes through familiarity. Through emotional memory. Through the desire to reconnect with what feels known, even if it was never fully aligned. You may notice this in subtle ways. A sudden urge to reach out to someone you have already distanced from. A thought that suggests maybe things were not as misaligned as they seem. A feeling that tries to pull you back into old conversations, old dynamics, old ways of thinking. This is not a sign to return. This is a test of your awareness, a test of whether you will move forward with clarity or revisit what has already been resolved. Because the truth is simple. If it was meant to continue, it would not have been removed. If it was aligned, it would not have created the confusion you experienced. If it belonged in your next phase, it would have moved with you instead of resisting you. This is why you must not second-guess what has already been made clear. You are not being asked to disconnect emotionally in a harsh way. You are being asked to remain aligned in a clear way. To honor what has been revealed without trying to reshape it into something more comfortable. Because comfort is not always alignment. And alignment is what is guiding you now. This is where discipline becomes important. Not discipline in action alone, but discipline in thought. Discipline in what you allow yourself to revisit mentally. Discipline in what you allow yourself to question again unnecessarily. Because clarity does not need to be reanalyzed once it hath been fully seen. And you have seen. That is why the separation occurred. That is why the exposure happened. That is why the path was cleared. And now your role is to continue forward without reopening what has already been closed. This is how you protect your acceleration. This is how you maintain your alignment. This is how you ensure that what has been restored continues to move without interruption. Because forward movement requires forward focus, not divided attention between where you are going and where you have already been released from. You are not missing anything behind you. Nothing that was removed was meant to support your future. Nothing that ended was meant to continue into what is now unfolding. Everything that remains ahead of you is what belongs to you. And the more you stay aligned with that understanding, the stronger your movement becomes. This is not a moment to hesitate. This is not a moment to revisit. This is a moment to remain clear. Because what has been broken off must remain broken off. And what hath been released must remain released. So that what is now moving toward you can fully arrive without interference. Type "I do not go back" in the comments if you accept this truth. Blessing code 1010 is now sealing your forward path. There is a shift that happens after clarity settles, after separation completes, after restoration begins and acceleration takes hold, and that shift is internal. It is not something others announce. It is not something you need validation for. It is something you feel deeply, steadily, and undeniably within yourself. It is the realization that you are no longer who you were when this journey began. You are no longer navigating from confusion. You are no longer reacting from uncertainty. You are no longer questioning your own awareness. You are now standing in something different, something stronger, something that cannot be shaken the way it once was. This is your authority. Not authority over people, not control over situations, but authority over yourself, over your decisions, over your direction, over what you allow and what you no longer accept. And this authority does not come from force. It comes from understanding. It comes from everything you have just moved through. Because every delay taught you patience. Every moment of confusion sharpened your discernment. Every experience of resistance strengthened your awareness. And now, all of that has formed something within you that cannot be undone. You are no longer easily influenced. You are no longer easily distracted. You are no longer easily pulled into what does not align. Because you recognize it immediately. That is power. That is what empowerment truly is. It is not loud. It is not aggressive. It does not need to prove itself. It is calm, steady, and certain. And when you walk in it, everything about the way you move changes. You begin to notice it in small ways first. The way you respond instead of react. The way you observe instead of absorb. The way you decide without needing external confirmation. The way you remain steady even when something around you tries to shift your focus. This is not something you are trying to do. This is who you have become. And this is why what once affected you no longer has the same impact. Because authority removes vulnerability to unnecessary influence. You are no longer open to everything. You are aligned with what is true. And that alignment creates a natural boundary. Not a forced one. Not one you have to defend constantly. But one that exists simply because you know. You know what feels right. You know what does not. You know what aligns. You know what does not. And because you know, you move accordingly. This is where confidence becomes natural. Not because everything is perfect, but because your awareness is clear. You no longer need to second-guess every step. You no longer need to overanalyze every situation. You no longer need to hesitate when something is clearly not aligned. You move. And when you move with certainty. This is the difference between who you were and who you are now. Before, you were navigating. And now, you are directing. Before, you were responding to what was happening. Now, you are choosing how you move regardless of what happens. Before, you were influenced by your environment. Now, your presence influences your environment. This is authority. And this is why your path can no longer be blocked the way it once was. Because your greatest vulnerability before was uncertainty. And now that uncertainty is gone, you are not walking blindly anymore. You are walking with awareness, and awareness changes everything. Because when you are aware, you do not walk into situations the same way. You do not give access the same way. You do not stay where you should not stay. You do not entertain what does not align. You move with clarity, and clarity keeps your path open. This is why you must embrace this version of yourself fully, not shrink back into old habits, not soften your awareness to make others comfortable, not question what you clearly see just to maintain familiarity. Because the authority you now carry is what protects your progress, is what keeps your path clear. It is what ensures that what once tried to interfere cannot find its way back in. This is not about becoming distant. This is about becoming aligned with truth, aligned with clarity, aligned with your direction. And once you remain in that alignment, everything continues to move the way it is meant to. You are not here to go back to who you were. You are here to move forward as who you have become. And who you have become cannot be blocked. Because you are no longer moving without awareness. You are walking in authority. Type "I walk in authority" in the comments if you accept this transformation. Blessing code 1111 is now activating divine confidence in your life. There is a moment at the end of every battle, every delay, every season of confusion and resistance when a final word is spoken. Not a suggestion, not a possibility, but a decree. A decision that cannot be reversed, negotiated, or delayed any further. And this right now is that moment in your life. Because everything you have walked through has led you here. Every delay that tested your patience. Every moment of confusion that sharpened your awareness. Every separation that cleared your path. Every exposure that revealed the truth. Every shift that restored what belonged to you. Every step of acceleration that brought you forward. All of it was leading to this final alignment. And now that you have arrived, something has been sealed. Not temporarily, not conditionally, but permanently. Your destiny is no longer something that can be interfered with the way it once was. It is no longer something that can be delayed by unseen resistance. It is no longer something that can be influenced by misaligned connections. Because everything that once had access has been removed. Everything that once created interference has been disconnected. Everything that once operated in subtlety hath been exposed and cleared. And now what remains is what is yours. Fully, clearly, and without obstruction. This is the decree. That what is meant for you will reach you. That what is aligned with you will connect with you. That what belongs to your path will move toward you without resistance. And that nothing, no person, no situation, no unseen force can stand in the way of what has already been decided. Because this is no longer a phase of testing. This is a phase of establishment. Where your path is not being negotiated, it is being secured. Where your movement is not being questioned, it is being confirmed. Where your direction is not being influenced, it is being protected. This is why everything feels different now. Not just externally, but internally. You feel a sense of certainty that was not there before. A calm confidence that does not need explanation. A clarity that does not need validation. Because something within you knows it is done. The struggle that once surrounded your path is no longer active. The resistance that once slowed your movement is no longer present. The confusion that once clouded your direction is no longer relevant. And now you are standing in a space where everything begins to move as it should have all along. This is not luck. This is not coincidence. This is alignment reaching its final stage. And once alignment reaches this stage, it does not reverse. Because what had been sealed cannot be undone. This is why you must move forward with full acceptance of this truth. Not waiting for confirmation. Not questioning whether it is real. not preparing for something to go wrong, but stepping fully into what is already established. Because hesitation no longer serves you. Doubt no longer protects you. Overthinking no longer benefits you. Clarity is your foundation now. And from that clarity you move. You move with confidence. You move with awareness. You move with the understanding that your path is no longer open to interference. This is your new reality. A reality where what belongs to you finds you. Where what aligns with you stays with you. Where what is meant for you unfolds without resistance. And where your destiny is no longer something distant but something active and protected. This is the final decree. It is done. It is sealed. And it is yours. Type IT is sealed in the comments if you receive this truth. Blessing code 1212 is now surrounding your life with divine protection and completion. And as this decree settles into your spirit, understand this sacred truth. Every time you sow into this mission, you become a vessel through which God reaches another soul standing where you once stood. When you release your seed through Super Thanks or the PayPal link in the description, you are not giving to a channel. You are igniting light in places still covered in darkness. The word speaks. Whoever sows generously will also reap generously. And this is not just scripture. It is a living promise being activated through your obedience. I step into this moment and say, I am releasing what I can, because I know heaven multiplies what is surrendered in faith. This is not a transaction. It is a prophetic action that opens doors not only for others, but for your own life as well. Your giving becomes oil that keeps this message flowing, reaching hearts across nations, breaking chains you may never see, but heaven records every impact. Do not delay this moment, because divine timing is attached to your response. So now, and watch how God answers with overflow, clarity, and unstoppable favor.